Hello everybody and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So today we're going to be doing yet another tier list. We're going to be doing a tier list of all of the state's Republican parties from Alabama all the way down to Wyoming in alphabetical order. And we are going to be grading them in terms of competence as well as the ideology that these people promote. For example, if you got a state where a lot of people are winning in, like Utah or South Carolina, but a lot of them are these neocons or rhinos, they're going to be docked for it. Or if you have a state that really doesn't have an operation, can't win to save their life, regardless of what politics the state party leaders hold, well, you're going to see it graded negatively. Here we have several tiers here: the S tier, the pretty good tier, the getting there or could be good tier, the not ideal but could be worse tier, the trash tier, the utter trash tier, and yes, the relatively non-existent tier. Either they don't really have a whole lot of prevalence, they don't really have a lot of success, don't stand a chance, etc. They're probably going to be going in that tier. So we're going to get started and fill this out, but first I have to tell you guys about our sponsor over at the Support the Second Coin, because you guys know it better than everybody that the Second Amendment in this country has been under attack for quite some time by the left. So what better way to get back at them by claiming your free Second Amendment is my gun permit coin. Just pay for shipping. All orders are fulfilled within 24 hours on average, so act now. The link will be in the pinned comment and the description down below. So here we go. We're going to start off with Alabama. And they've had success for quite some time, ever since the 90s or so. Alabama has solidified itself as a solid red state, and they've had some good people over the years as well in positions of power. I will put them in the not ideal but could be worse tier. Definitely, they still have some rhinos and neocons in their caucus. As we know, their governor, Kay Ivey, she locked down the state. And even though Mo Brooks was good for quite some time, he has like full TDS now. And we don't really know how Katie Britt's going to be in the Senate either. The representatives are a mixed bag. There's a couple of decent people, but some rhinos as well. We'll put them in the not ideal but could be worse tier, because at least they do win elections besides that horrific 2017 special election. So up next, we have the state of Alaska, and I'm going to put them in the trash category. Yes, they have had some success. Yes, they have won, but still just shilling for Murkowski, allowing their bizarre top four primary system with ranked choice voting. They couldn't stop that, and because of that fact alone, and because of their multi-primary system, because of the infighting we see there, there's a reason why they have a Democrat congresswoman, even though it's a state that voted for Trump by 10 or more points twice, and it voted heavily for Romney and McCain and Bush before him. It hasn't actually gone blue, I think, since 1964. It's absolutely insane. But up next, we have the state of Arizona. Arizona, I'm going to put in the not ideal but could be worse tier. Some people are going to want it to be in the trash tier because of this past cycle, but there are a lot of factors here. They have a very good congressional delegation. They typically win big, and they're actually arguably the most conservative, the most America First delegation in the entire country. They've had their rhinos in the past. They have been purged. However, we talk about the ability to win. Definitely not a lot of pushback there on the election system. In places like Maricopa County, they let the Dems dictate the laws. They signed off on pretty much every single piece of legislation there. That definitely helped the slate of candidates lose this cycle. Kelly Ward is somebody who I think has the right ideas, but when we talk about actual execution, like I said, could be worse, but not exactly getting there either. So up next, we have the state of Arkansas. Arkansas is a very mid Republican Party from what I understand, but they still could very well be good. Again, this was a state that used to be heavily Democrat back in the 1990s. Even Bill Clinton won it overwhelmingly twice, and even though Bush was able to win the state, he didn't win the state by an insane margin. However, we saw Donald Trump come along. He beat the former First Lady of Arkansas by a sizable amount in 2016. Same thing in 2020. There still are some rhinos there, but they possibly could be primaried out. I mean, Boozman almost was forced into a runoff there in the Senate race. I'm going to put this in the getting there tier because it really could be good, maybe 10 years down the line. Up next, we have California. And honestly, I'm going to put them in the not ideal, could be worse category. And the reason for this is they actually know how to play the game to win. They know how to ballot harvest effectively in California. They know how to take advantage of the system the way a lot of Republicans in other states don't exactly know how to do. And because of that, they're able to keep a lot of these seats and even some Democrat districts red without exactly putting up the most rhino type of candidate possible. Definitely statewide, they have problems. Definitely it's getting narrower, but still, it could be a lot worse given the fact that it is California. In the current state that they're in. If we're talking about the 1990s, California GOP easily would go in the utter trash category. So, up next we have Colorado. Oh, here we go. Utter trash. Complete utter trash. There's not exactly a whole real explanation for Colorado's trend, other than the fact that we know that there have been changes in educational demography. You have a lot of Californians moving in, definitely pushing the state to the left. Demographic change as well with immigration to a lesser extent, maybe not affecting it as much as some other states like Arizona. But still, it is part of the problem there. But still, this is a state that voted heavily Republican, even 1996, but the leadership couldn't do anything to really prevent the state from becoming a Democrat stronghold. It's what, D+20 now, going on D+20. It's basically a state that is synonymous with the Pacific Northwest that happens to be in the Mountain West, I guess you would say. So definitely a very weak GOP there, and the candidates that they field, whether they happen to actually get it or whether they happen to be these never-Trumpers, completely fall flat regardless. So up next, we have the state of Connecticut. I'm going to put this one in relatively non-existent. I mean, they've had some close statewide offices there, but, I mean, seriously, they haven't even held a congressional seat in the state for decades now. I'm going to put that in the relatively non-existent category. So up next, we have Delaware. Again, what have Republicans really won in Delaware? They could have maybe gotten the Senate race there in 2010 had Mike Castle won that primary, but even then, that was not technically a sure thing, even though he probably would have won. So Delaware is going to go in the relatively non-existent category. The state party apparatus there is just overall non-existent, pretty weak. So there. I mean, this is a state that after Biden, you could say it could be a little bit more competitive. Republicans did pretty well there in the midterms, given all of the factors, but still, they have a long, long way to go. Up next, we have Florida. I don't even know if I need to explain this a whole lot, but it's going in S tier. You talk about the fact that this was a swing state. Maybe you wanted to call it a right-leaning swing state here and there, but it also kind of had a lot of neocons in the state party, and it still does, but there also is this rising America First or competent faction that is authentically conservative, that gets things done. Definitely the state went from voting for Trump by just 1 point or so back in 2016, then it was Trump by almost 4, then DeSantis and Rubio both won it by close to 20 this cycle. The state has been completely terraformed, and the GOP there is extremely competent at getting things done and getting people out to vote, and they know how to win. So up next, we have the state of Georgia. Georgia, I'm going to be putting Georgia in the not ideal but could be worse category. I'd be tempted to put it into trash, but they actually did a decent redistricting job, and they did end up holding a lot of these statewide offices there this election cycle, which was a good thing for the Georgia GOP. I still think they don't have a future, but given the fact that they're working with what they have and they have a lot of trends against them, it could be a lot worse than it currently is right now. So, up next, we have Hawaii, relatively non-existent. That really doesn't even need to be said. It's 70-30D, GOP basically. I don't even know how many state legislature seats they hold, but it's not a lot of them. Up next, we have the state of Idaho. Honestly, I think Idaho really could be good in the future. You talk about the fact that there were a lot of these rhinos in the state legislature, and I think the AG, and they got primaried out this cycle. Yeah, Brad Little did survive, but he didn't survive by like a ridiculous margin. against Janice McGeehan, and definitely there should have been a larger effort to primary Mike Crapo, but I still think there's a very good chance 10, 15 years down the line that Idaho could very well be a bastion of conservatism and a very competent state party. The takeover is underway, but we just really haven't seen the results of it there quite yet. So I'm going to put it in the could be good category. Up next, we have the state of Illinois, which is going to go in the trash category. Definitely, we talk about a Rust Belt state. Illinois technically is one. I know Chicago and the suburbs are working against Republicans there, but still, we know that if they were actually relatively competent, that they would be able to perform a lot better than they currently do. And we talk about the redistricting map there. It was awful. There was no concerted effort to really push back against it. And Republicans are really going to be shut out of power in the state for quite some time. I mean, Darren Bailey did a lot better than I think a lot of people thought he would do. He did actually, I think, better than Mastriano despite running in like a Biden plus 17, 18 state. But the GOP there just doesn't really exist, and other than Mary Miller, there's just nobody that is really that notable and solid out of the state of Illinois either. So up next we have Indiana, which again is underratedly garbage because this is a state that has moved to the right. We know that, but there's just so many rhinos in their leadership, and it is a Rust Belt state, and it is a state that Trump did a lot better in than past Republicans, but still there's a lacking of leadership there. We talk about the candidates that are put up. A lot of them don't get it. You have Mike Braun in the Senate, who has slightly improved ever since he got owned by Tucker Carlson. You have Eric Holcomb for governor, which is basically DeWine to the West. And you have your other senator, Todd Young, who caves in on a lot of legislation. So hopefully Braun goes for governor. That'll be a little bit of like an upgrade there. Maybe you could get an upgrade in the Senate. But for a state that there's so much potential, it's still in the trash category. Up next, we have Iowa, which now has all 4 of their districts in Congress Republican. You have pretty much all the statewide offices there. The party's pretty competent overall. Kim Reynolds has done a decent job as governor. She won by 17 points as a result. It's definitely going to go in the pretty good category. So, up next, we have the state of Kansas. And we know where this is going. Kansas is going to go in the utter trash category. This is a state that has been a solid Republican state at the presidential level, but we talk about the statewide offices every cycle, and the parties just drop the ball. Drop the ball with the economic messaging under Brownback. They've dropped the ball in terms of actually trying to oust Laura Kelly, and you have a fairly liberal governor in there as a result, and that definitely impacted some of these down ballot races. Thankfully, Kobach won, but he barely got by. So either way, Kansas, it's a state that's zooming to the left, in my opinion, but thankfully by the time it does become a really competitive state, Delaware and Rhode Island very well could be on the upswing for Republicans. So definitely going to happen in like the 2030s. So up next, we have the state of Kentucky. Kentucky is going to go probably, I would say, in the not ideal but could be worse category. You have some decent people like Thomas Massey in Congress. The party actually does a lot better in the state now compared to 20 years ago, which is good. But you still have people like Mitch McConnell. You still have a lot of these weak people in power. Obviously, Mitch McConnell would probably have a chance at losing a primary in 2026, but he'll probably retire. Either way, we'll see what happens. I'm going to put it in the not ideal but could be worse tier. You could argue that it would go in the trash tier, but there are some decent people, and they have done a pretty good job in presidential years, but they got to start winning those gubernatorial elections. Obviously, should be easier this time without Matt Bevin there, but still, Bashir is going to be the toughest nut to crack for Republicans next year. Speaking of Republican races that are up next year, Louisiana, which again, this is a state where they drop the ball significantly, 2 cycles in a row with the governorship there that definitely impacted the state slightly. Overall, I think it could be worse. There's a couple decent people in Congress, but it's just kind of like meh. It's a very meh state party. Could be a lot better. We'll put it in the not ideal but could be worse tier. Up next, we have Maine. Maine's going to go in the trash tier. This is definitely a state where Republicans could arguably be doing better in, but they just don't. And Paul LePage, he won it twice. He was going up this year, didn't really receive a lot of help. The campaign really wasn't the greatest, and he ended up losing by like 8 against a governor who was really not that popular. Maine belongs in the trash tier. Again, you talk about the Jared Golden seat, them putting up Poliquin. You talk about the fact that the only Republican that's been electorally successful there is Susan Collins, and she's a total rhino. So that's going to go in the trash tier. Up next, we have Maryland, which, again, you could maybe argue was around this range, the trash tier, the not ideal tier, back when Hogan was there, even though he was a total rhino. But it's going to go in the relatively non-existent tier. Even though Hogan was their governor, he basically had no power because the state legislature controlled the state, and the fact that he was a total rhino doesn't really help the case on this ranking. It's going to be relatively non-existent now, especially because he's gone. Same thing with Massachusetts, where I don't even know the last time Republicans held a congressional seat there. It might have been the 1990s or so. So we'll be going to Michigan. Michigan arguably is the most trash GOP. There's so much potential in this state. You talk about it being a Rust Belt state, but Trump's not going to be there to bail you out every single time. And Republicans don't really know this, and they take voters for granted there. And all the candidates that they put up, and pretty much everybody in Congress is either meh, a rhino, or just somebody that doesn't really know how to get things done and win. So it belongs in the utter trash category. It needs to be saved badly. It's possible Trump could win the state in 2024 if a lot of things go right, but the Dems have a trifecta there now. It's absolutely abysmal. That's in the utter trash category. Although Minnesota, you could argue, is worse, a state that is super demographically favorable to Republicans, but they haven't even won a statewide office there since 2006, haven't won a federal statewide office there since 2002, haven't won a presidential election there since Nixon's landslide back in 1972, and before that it didn't go red since Eisenhower. So Minnesota, their GOP is total trash. A lot of them are very liberal as well. They cave constantly on everything. Doesn't help them out. You could take a look at Scott Jensen, how that really panned out for them in 2022, arguably costed them some statewide offices, but who else would the GOP really have ran? I don't really know, but that doesn't really help their case here. Belongs in the utter trash category for sure. Up next, we have Mississippi, and again, they have won some races here, this is true, but there's so many rhinos in their caucus. Thankfully, they got rid of Palazzo and replaced him with Easel, so that is an upgrade there. So again, it could be worse, but still you talk about it. Reeves, he's meh. I mean, a lot of these people, they've won, but still what they did to Michael Cassidy is disgraceful. I'm going to put that in the could be worse tier, obviously, but it's still far from ideal. Maybe could be good in the future, but still, we'll put it in the not ideal tier. So, up next, we have the state of Missouri. Missouri's actually been getting there, one could argue. I think that there's a lot of potential for the party. A bunch of people in their congressional delegation have been solid. A lot of the people that were the frontrunners for the Senate race were all pretty much very good. I do believe that Missouri is a state that could continue to be solid red. It used to be that swing state. 2008, it was close even. It's zoomed to the right since. I think there's a lot of potential in Missouri. We could get some better people as the years go on. I'll put it in the getting there category. So, up next, we have the state of Montana, which definitely, you have a very good governor. You have a very good representative there as well in Rosendale. I think ideologically wise, Montana's GOP is pretty solid. You could even put it in the pretty good category. There still are ways to go. The fact that Democrats do still have one of the Senate seats there. The fact that Ryan Zinke, I'm not the biggest fan of the guy either. So there's still some work to do. But hopefully we'll put it in the could be good category. Maybe after 2024, when Tester's gone, we can upgrade them. So, the state of Nebraska. Now, this is a state where, again, it's kind of meh. Thankfully, Sass is out the door. You're going to have a governor who's okay, but it's like basically a C-tier GOP. Very mid. Belongs in the not ideal category, but could be a lot worse. So, up next, we have the state of Nevada. And Nevada, I really believe that they could be good. We talk about the fact that the Dems have totally collapsed, and this cycle definitely, you talk about the fact that they didn't do a very good job at getting the vote out in the rural areas. There wasn't a lot of harvesting there like the Democrats have been doing and using to their advantage, but I think that they're waking up. I really do. And this has a lot of potential to be the next Florida. Clark County still moved right. You did flip the governorship there. So, like I said, it could be good. There still is some work to be done there, though, I will say. So, up next, we have the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire is not exactly that competent of their GOP. Chris Sununu is their governor. He has been winning by decent margins, but didn't even get by as much as he did in 2020. And you don't have a single congressional seat there. And it's kind of a big mess all around at the presidential level. Republicans aren't really getting their act together there. I thought the state had a lot more potential, probably, around 2016 to be a Republican state, but even though Sununu has been governor there, and even though he's tried to be a team player at times despite being a total rhino, he's not really affecting the state's culture for the better, and it's still moving to the left from what I've seen. We'll put it in the trash tier. Up next, we have the state of New Jersey. We'll put them in trash as well. You have two congressmen there. One of them is a rhino. The other one used to be a Democrat. Oh, actually, there are three now. Keene won, but he arguably only won because of his last name. Like I said, there's a lot of work to be done there. This is a state where Republicans used to have control over to a decent amount in terms of how it voted relative to the national environment, but now it's moving to the left. I will say that their GOP hasn't really done the best job, and even though they did well in 2021, they didn't win. If they won, we could argue that they could be moved up a tier or two, but still, moral victory really isn't a victory, especially in politics, so keep that in mind. Up next, we have New Mexico. I would argue they belong in the trash, if not even the utter trash tier. They had one congresswoman there. Now she's gone after this cycle. It was kind of an upset loss, one could argue, and they just haven't really had control over the state in any meaningful way in recent history. A lot of people speculated Ronchetti could actually have pulled it off, but he didn't pull it off. He lost by, I believe, a similar margin to what he lost his Senate race by, which was a federal office, which was surprising. So I'm going to put them in trash. A lot of work needs to be done there. You could even consider moving them to utter trash. There's just no coordinated effort there by the Republicans, and it's kind of sad. Even though they have dumped some money into New Mexico, it doesn't really amount to anything. Up next, we have the state of New York. And I think New York, after what we saw this cycle, can be moved to pretty good. Now you actually fought back effectively in court against the Hochulmander, and it was effective. You flipped like a ridiculous amount of congressional seats. Lee Zeldin did very well there. He saved the House for Republicans with his down-ballot coattails. You could argue he gave up his seat to save the party. And overall, I'd say that it's a decent party. I think that you maybe can say there's not a whole lot of potential for Republicans to actually win it. Maybe some statewide offices down the line, but given the fact that they've lost a lot of Republican voters to places like Florida, and they're still hanging in there, still improving, I think you got to put them in the pretty good category. Up next, we have the state of North Carolina. Also put them in the pretty good category. You talk about the fact you do have a decent amount of the population still in the suburbs in some of these places like Charlotte and the Research Triangle there, but it's still a decently Republican state. Overall, Democrats got it very narrowly in 2008. That was arguably the fluke in the grand scheme of things, even though it's always usually close. But it should still remain a lean Republican state down the line. And Mark Robinson becoming governor in 2024 is definitely going to really help things there when Roy Cooper is gone, assuming that he does get over the finish line. So, up next, we have none other than the state of North Dakota. Definitely, I think that there is potential here because of the fact that they do things by convention and the fact that you did almost see Hoeven lose the convention there for the primary. I think there's potential. There are a lot of rhinos there, so I think we could probably, I guess, move it down here because of the rhinos they have. But either way, I think that just because of the fact that they have shown signs of potential, I'll put them in the getting there could be good category. So up next, we have Ohio. Ohio, I really think there's a lot of potential there. There's still some ways to go. DeWine is a rhino. We know that. But still, Ohio does have a decent amount of potential to be a decent state party. They already kind of have been, even without Trump on the ballot. They've been able to win races in 2018. They won races in 2022 by a sizable margin, pretty much statewide. Democrats put up their best Senate recruit possible and fell short by 7 points. Either way, we'll put Ohio in the getting there category. Up next, we have Oklahoma. Honestly, I would put them in the not ideal but could be worse category. They tend to win, but there are a decent amount of rhinos in their delegation. You have people like Mark Wayne Mullen, who's a neocon, even though he's not the worst. You have Lankford as the other senator. You also have a couple of weak people in Congress. There's nobody that's really that good, despite it being such a solid Republican state. And then on top of that, Kevin Stitt, their governor, a little bit weak on crime. That's arguably one of the reasons why he underperformed so much in 2022. So up next, we have the state of Oregon. Again, they did flip a congressional seat there this cycle, but couldn't exactly really get the governorship and haven't been competitive for quite some time. We'll put them in the trash category. Up next, we have the state of Pennsylvania, and you talk about the Senate race debacle there. You talk about the effort and what really was put into getting Republicans across the finish line there this cycle was completely non-existent. Even before 2022, 2018, they did a horrendous job. 2014, even, they did a horrendous job overall. Donald Trump himself, he can win the state. He has coattails down ballot. He has a big support base, but if the party's not exactly tapping into that and funding decent candidates or viable candidates that can win, and the people that have gotten by, like Toomey in 2010, have been complete rhinos. Overall, I think you have to put them in the trash tier. I don't believe they're as bad as Michigan. I don't believe that they're nearly as bad as Minnesota, but still, I'll put them in the trash tier. Up next, we have Rhode Island, relatively non-existent. Again, they fell short there this cycle, and Fung, even though he was up in the polls, fell short there as well. So we'll put them in the relatively non-existent category, but maybe in the future, just like Delaware. Up next, we have South Carolina, which, again, the party has a lot of rhinos in it. We could talk about the rhinos of years past, people like Bob Inglis, even some of these former senators and representatives there. But you have Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott as your senators. You did have Tom Rice, who voted to impeach Trump. He's out of the way. But then you have Nancy Mace, which is one of the worst people in Congress overall. She got by in her primary. And the other people have been relatively just meh. You do have some decent people. You do have Jimmy Duncan there. You have Rolf Norman. I've met him. Great guy. But still, overall, the party has to be in the trash category, given the fact that it is a state that has been solid. You know what? Actually, no. McMaster has been a solid governor. We'll move it up to not ideal, but could be worse. Because of that fact alone, I would put it in between these two. Ideologically, overall, there's just a lot of very weak people in the party. I'm very torn on this. I think we'll just keep them in trash for now. So, up next, we have the state of South Dakota. Again, South Dakota is a state where you do have a governor who has been fairly weak. The state legislature has some decent people there, but Noam's been vastly overrated. People are like, well, she didn't lock down. And it's like, first of all, there's not really a dense population in South Dakota, for one. And for two, she wanted to lock down. The state legislature blocked it. She took a victory lap overall. It's all about keeping up appearances, maybe for a future presidential run. She's owned by Sanford Health, which is her major donor. There's a reason why she's flip-flopped on the whole transgender sports thing there. Honestly, South Dakota, and they also have very weak senators. They have the unfortunately named Dusty Johnson as their lone representative in Congress. They belong in the trash category overall. Up next, we have Tennessee, which, again, there are some decent people there. Diana Harshbarger, their governor's okay, but still does have a decent amount of industry moving there that could make Nashville a little bit bluer. Overall, it's not really a state that's going anywhere anytime soon. I probably would put Tennessee in the getting there could be good category because there is a lot of potential. And there's also a potential that it could be a very populated, conservative stronghold there culturally in the future as well, kind of like Florida. Maybe not as big as Florida or Texas, but you do have a lot of conservatives moving there as well. So we'll put that in the getting there category. Could be good. Up next, we have Texas, which again, there are some rhinos, but the people that run the state party overall are actually pretty decent and do tend to keep people in line for the most part when crunch time comes. And when you look at things like demography, and even though the ethnic makeup of Texas isn't exactly that far off from California, the state party has been competent enough to actually keep it a solid red state, even though it has moved to the left in recent years. So I'll put it in the pretty good category. Ideologically, yeah, there's a few rhinos. It could be better. But also just based off of how the state party gets things done and knows how to win, we'll put it in the pretty good category. Up next, we have Utah. Just rhino land. Yeah, they win. I mean, they're not going to lose to Democrats, but still, you look at people like Mitt Romney. You look at people like their congressional delegation as well. They have some weak people. Even like their best Congressman, Burgess Owens, has had a lot of iffy votes over the past Congress or so. And the fact that Mike Lee is like the best the state has to offer, and even then a lot of the GOP defected to the independent, I'll have to put it in the trash category. Up next, we have Vermont. Yes, they have Phil Scott, but they have nothing else. And Phil Scott's basically a Democrat as far as I'm concerned. We'll put them in the relatively non-existent category. Up next, we have Virginia. Virginia's going to go in the getting there could be good category. Definitely, they came close in some congressional districts that they weren't exactly favored in this cycle. On top of that, they have the governorship, they have the AG slot, they have the lieutenant governorship there, despite the state moving to the left. I think that the state party's turning a corner. I don't think it's really going to flip anytime soon, but still, it's not exactly going to hit rock bottom the way it did in 2018 or 2020. So, up next, we have the state of Washington. They're trash. Again, they even lost the 3rd district this cycle, which was Trump plus 8. They're not exactly that competent. They don't exactly have a statewide office there. Even Tiffany Smiley, who was supposed to get the Senate race within 10, fell short by, 14 points or so. Honestly, it might vote to the right of Colorado at this point, but that's not really saying much. So up next, we have the state of West Virginia. West Virginia, honestly, they've been decent in terms of the way that the state has moved. It used to be a blue state or a swing state all the way up until 2000 when it flipped red, even though a lot of people then said it would go blue. And it's moved to the right every single cycle, and it kind of shows how out of touch the Dems are. But still, there's some decent people there. Alex Mooney is decent. Jim Justice, he's got kind of a mixed track record as governor. It could be a lot better. I think there's a lot of potential given how, nationalistic and populist a lot of the population is there, but still they have a little bit of ways to go, but I do believe that they will be a solid, competent party in the near future. Up next, we have Wisconsin. Wisconsin tends to be the most competent out of the Rust Belt 3. Republicans even got a supermajority in the state Senate this past cycle, which kind of allows them to just do whatever they want and impeach whoever they want. And they have a decent congressional delegation compared to some of these other Rust Belt states. And they drew the map fairly favorable to the point where they've been able to hold a decent amount of seats there. They still have ways to go. I will say that it could be a lot worse given the fact that they do have a lot going for them, especially given trends, but still a lot has to be done. And what they did in terms of some of these other statewide offices this cycle, they really dropped the ball significantly. Even Ron Johnson only won by a hair, should have been by a lot more. So we're going to put Wisconsin in the could be worse, but not ideal. Could be good though, but still long ways to go. So up next, we have Wyoming. Honestly, they have been winning and have been the most Republican state in the union for quite some time. They're doing something right, and they successfully were able to primary out Liz Cheney. I'll put them in the, I guess you will say getting there could be good category, but given the fact that Cheney's gone, you may even want to put them in the pretty good category. You have to give them props on that fact alone, just because of the fact that the state is the most Republican state in the country and has been for quite some time now. So take a good look at it. This is the final product of the tier list. In the S tier, we have Florida. Could even rename it to F tier based off of that alone, but it would be a misnomer. In the pretty good tier, we have Iowa, New York, North Carolina, Texas, Wyoming. Got a decent amount of states in the getting there could be good category. We have the not ideal but could be worse category. We have the trash category featuring states such as Pennsylvania and New Mexico. We have the utter trash category featuring states such as Michigan and Minnesota and Kansas and Colorado. And then we have the relatively non-existent category, which has a bunch of states that just are not really seen as Republican states and may not for quite some time. So, anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Like this video down below, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Red Eagle, out.